Cool, man. Doing all right, dude?
Yeah, man, I'm good. I'm good. I'm excited for this one because this is up my alley. I'm an 80s kid.
You're an 80s kid, and my movie nerdness come from my parents showing me all their favorite movies from growing up in the 80s. So this is going to be a good one. So before we just jump right into it, let's kind of so what I did was I hit you up and I said, "Man, let's do an 80s movie because for one, the new Top Gun's is out, and also the new Jurassic World's coming out. So
Yes.
I was like, why not go? Let's just do
Right.
this. Let's jump on the train while we're at it. So here's what we're doing. So we're doing the 80s movies, but I left out horror, superhero movies, franchises, which would include like Rocky, Star Wars, um,
Right.
anything
Correct.
that has four or more, because I feel that if you do that, that's just like for me, honestly, it's just a cheap way out of it because you can say Karate Kid, and there would be like, all six of them. So I felt it would be easier
Right.
to do that instead of like, because I could pick Rocky 4 because to me, that's the greatest Rocky movie to ever be made. But then that would be leaving out, three and then five. So it would just be confusing. So I just left out all those, and horror can also be its own genre as well. We could do a horror movies and put the 80 ones in there. So that was not really rules, but that's what I was that's what I was going for, just to make it plain and simple. But we've got our top five here. And for me, Al, I don't know about you, this was the hardest list we've ever had to make doing these movies.
Yeah, I agree, man. I told you in a message that a text message that are you still there?
I'm here.
Yeah, okay. I told you in a text message that I was sure you were doing five because narrowing it down to the top five is crazy, but I somehow did it. And again, this is our opinions, right? Like this
Right.
isn't like, we're not taking this from, the top 10, grossing movies of that decade or whatever. This is our
Right.
opinion, but I
I
have I have my top five and I have seven honorable mentions.
Okay, I have eight honorable mentions. I had 10 and I had to eliminate two. So but yeah, it's I base my list on how I think the movies are rewatchable for me.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah, and
so
you mentioned top. Go ahead.
go ahead.
I was saying that you mentioned Top Gun and Jurassic World. I'm so excited to see both, and I'm actually going to see both at the drive-in on Saturday night. They're playing together at my local drive-in, so I get both movies in one shot.
Oh wow, so they're playing like back to back.
Yeah, they're playing Jurassic World, and then they're playing Top Gun, Dude, Maverick.
That's crazy. I was going to go see Top Gun Maverick when it released, but my parents were such big fans of it that they were like, we want to go see it too. So I'm like, fine, I'll wait to your guys. So I think we're going this weekend to see Top Gun because I hear it's like amazing. I hear it's one of the best movies to ever be created. So
Yeah,
I'm a
I was
little
scared.
nervous. I'm a little nervous, but we'll see how it goes.
Yes, sir.
All right, Al, once you go ahead and count us down from I'm going 5 to 1. You can go 1 to 5, however
Yes.
you want to do this.
No,
Once you go,
I want to do it the same way you're doing it, Dylan. And first and foremost, I want to thank you for
absolutely.
having me on the hodgepodge again. I love when you hit me up to do these movie lists because it's up my alley and I love it. Um, but I'm gonna do the same thing you are. I'm gonna go
Okay.
from 5 to 1, and then we'll talk honorable mentions because that way
Okay.
we don't when we the honorable mentions we'll just mention them. We won't like talk about each one of them for like 10 minutes or whatever.
Okay, cool. So, man, floor is yours. Go with your number five.
So my number five is from 1986, and it is Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Ooh.
I
This
can't
is one I
believe
struggled
how
with,
many.
man. This is one I struggle with, man. I didn't know whether to put on the list or not.
Um, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I can't tell you how many times I've seen it because I lost count. Um, I pull it up every once in a while to watch it. And it's just as good the first time as it was the first time. It as a young kid, when I saw it, I was 10 years old. When I saw it for the first time, I rented it on video, VHS video, to see it. And it instantly taught me how to skip school because I mean, it even goes through a play, like a step by step on how to fake out the parents. So, I mean, great movie. And I love all the, um, you know, response it gets nowadays. Like when kids see it now with this generation now, when they see it now, they're like, wow, that's a really cool movie. I'm sure it doesn't get the same as it did back in the 80s, but even my kids have seen it and they like it. And I also like the fact that it has its own cult following where they have a million and one theories about this. I don't know if you've heard this, Dylan, but I've heard the theory of Ferris Bueller's Day Off that where the entire thing was a dream. And basically it's the whole movie's about Cameron, and that the theory goes that Cameron is sick in bed and he dreams about this day with Ferris and his girlfriend, and that Ferris and his girlfriend aren't even real people. They are, in other words, Cameron is a loner. He has terrible parents who are never home, and he's just happy all the time when he's sick. He'd rather be happy. He'd rather be sick because then at least they care. All right. He's one of those depressed teenagers who'd rather be sick because then at least they give a damn about him. And that Ferris Bueller is the embodiment of what he isn't. Okay. Nobody knows who Cameron Fry is at that high school, but everybody knows who Ferris Bueller is. He has the hottest girl in the school, played by Mia Sara.
Right.
And so and Cameron is single, doesn't have a girlfriend. So Ferris is the most popular person in school and has the hottest girlfriend. These are things that he wishes. He also doesn't have any siblings. Cameron doesn't have any siblings. Whereas even though she's annoying, at the end you realize that Jennifer Grey is in there as a little shout out for Jennifer Grey. So Jennifer Grey's in there as Ferris's sister.
Right.
So that's the kind of the sibling. That's where the sibling kind of ties in. Then there's the parents. Ferris Bueller's parents are the most naive and perfect parents of all time, whereas they are the total polar opposite of Cameron's parents, who are never home, excuse me, and who, could seemingly care less about their son. Whereas Ferris, when he's sick, quote unquote sick, okay, because he wasn't sick at all, they, are taking care of him. They're making sure, they're checking up on him. Dad calls, all these things happen. So I love that theory. I'm not buying it. I would just like to, look at it for what it is, where a bunch, 3 friends skip school and have a ball out in Chicago. Right. Okay, let's just say that that's what really happened there. But I love the theory because if you match up all the stuff, it makes sense. But that it did make my top 5. Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I can't remember how many times I've seen it.
That theory kind of makes sense to me because it's like they did a lot of stuff in one day. Like it was crazy the stuff that they did in a day. But my favorite part of that movie, which is kind of the idiocracy of teenagers, is when they take his dad's car and they decide, oh no, there was this many miles on it. They put it in reverse thinking that's going to eliminate the numbers and put it back down to what it was.
Right.
But Ferris Bueller, man, that is in my honorable mention. I'll say that. It was I haven't seen it as much as you have. I've seen it a handful of times. It's a great movie, especially coming from Matthew Broderick. This was one of his first films, and I think it kind of put him, in the spotlight.
let me just say that there are many iconic films in there are many iconic films in the 80s that are famous for the car. I mean, or there is a car
Right.
as part of the movie that's famous. And that's one of them. Ferris Bueller has the 1961 Ferrari 250 GT California. Let me tell you that if I ever hit the Powerball, that car will be in my garage.
You take that. I'll take the DeLorean. How about that?
Well, I'd like to have both, but we'll talk about that one later.
We will. So my number 5, Al, comes from 1988, a little old movie directed by Penny Marshall, Tom Hanks and Big. Man, to me, this is one of the. I mean, this easily could have been top 3 for me. This Big is one of those movies where you watch it once, it's easily to put it back in the player, skip it all the way back, however you want to watch it, and rewatch it 2, 3, 4 times in a row. I mean, for me, this movie is that good. Like, I mean, it's crazy to think that this little kid, Josh is his name, goes to a carnival, wishes he was big, and then the granting machine turned off, was unplugged the entire time. Next thing you know, this 12-year-old boy is now a 30-year-old man, and it's cool to see. Here's where, in my opinion, it gets great, is because Tom Hanks acting as a 12-year-old, in my opinion, is on point. He's trying to act, he's trying to act 30 like he's supposed to, but inside he's like a 12-year-old little boy, and he gets a job working with this toy manufacturer company, and is actually gets good because he knows what 12-year-olds want to play with. I mean, it's crazy. I love this movie to death. Big is big for me. It's great.
It's interesting that you mentioned Big. It's in my honorable mentions. I've seen Big a lot. I don't Not as much as Ferris Bueller, but Big, yeah, Big's got everything you want, right? It's got like your childhood in there. You got your best friend, all the stuff that we used to do in the 80s, collecting like cards and playing stickball, and
Right.
just starting to get interested in girls and things like that. And yeah, it's really heartwarming, and the whole thing. And then of course you got Tom Hanks, which the entire thing of him being a 30-year-old trapped in it, or an 8-year-old trapped in a 30-year-old, or 10-year-old trapped in a 30-year-old's body, is hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
I got a little side note there about the Zoltar machine that
Right. He made the wish from
that he makes the wishes on. So there's an arcade not more than 10 minutes away from my house that has one of those Zoltar machines in it.
That's cool.
Yeah, I'm not kidding. There's a place called Country Junction, which is a natural place, a national chain of general store, and they have an arcade attached to it. And I take my kids there all the time because it's fun. There's a lot of arcade games they can play, and then they can turn in their tickets for prizes, and they can play skee ball and all that cool stuff. And it just happens to have a Zoltar machine, which I always get a kick out of seeing it there. I don't know where the guy got it, but it's there, and it's just kind of there, and it does exactly the same thing. You put your quarter in, and it grants you a wish, supposedly.
That's cool, man. I've never actually seen one in person. I don't think. If I have, I don't
Yeah, you know
remember.
what? You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna take a picture of it next time we go up there, and I'm gonna send it to you.
Okay.
So to prove to you I'm not crazy, or no, it actually does exist. And I mean, I'm sure there's a lot more of them out there somewhere, but
Right.
I think it's awesome. Like when I first saw it, I was like, holy crap, that's the Zoltar machine.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah.
I had that moment, but yeah, Big's definitely a good one.
Our menu number 4.
All right. My number 4 is Goonies from
Okay.
1985. I can relate to Goonies so many ways. Number one, as you know, I'm a big wrestling fan.
Right.
And Cyndi Lauper was really hot at the time, and then she does the songs in the movie. That's part of it.
Right.
Back then they had actual music videos on MTV, not what MTV is now. And one of the videos that they had at the time was Good Enough, which was one of the songs in the movie, and it had all the Goonies cast in it. What a cast. I mean, look where they've come, you know. You love superhero movies, you know, look at where Josh Brolin has become.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Sean Astin. I mean, you know, the Lord of the Rings movies alone made him rich. You know what I'm saying? Not that he wasn't already, but I mean, a lot of child actors kind of drift away. Some of those other ones kind of did, right? Like Ke Kwan, who played who played Short Round in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. That movie and this movie, The Goonies, are the only two movies you ever see him in. Then he disappears. You never hear from him again. The kid that played Chunk ended up being a lawyer. Some of the other actors and actresses kept acting, but Josh Brolin and Sean Astin, those two had the biggest careers. But that aside, the story of kids going on an adventure, trying to save their parents from losing their house, and the whole thing with Sloth, the Fratellis. I mean, Joey Pants is one of the Fratellis. You gotta love Joey Pants in there. I forget the lady's name, but the lady who plays Ma Fratelli, she was in Throw Mama from the Train or something. She was a heck of an actress. Funny. Sloth and all that stuff. I mean, what's there not to love to go on an adventure like that? I mean, my childhood friends and I, once we saw this movie, tried to go on similar adventures, trying to find things, but that's how much influence it was on us. Like, we decided to go look for caves and look for this and that around, you know, in the woods and stuff. We got in a lot more trouble than we should have. But the Goonies, you know, I just love it, and it's one of those movies I can watch over and over and over again and still be entertained. So.
Right. I have one that is similar to that, my number 4, you know, that kind of reminds you a lot of your childhood. And that, for me, my number 4 is 1986's Stand By Me, the Rob Reiner film. For me, it's like every kid growing up, Al. I mean, it's, you try to act tough, so you're going to curse. You're going to skip school. You're going to say, I'm staying over at Josh's house while Josh is staying over at Al's, and I'm going over at Al's house. I mean, we've all done it as kids, but they just throw in this plot where you're not sure what's going to happen. They go on a hunt for a dead body of a missing kid that came out of their hometown, and then they just go into, I mean, the train scene alone was one of the most gut-wrenching things you could ever see in a movie starring kids.
When they're on the bridge, you mean?
When they're on the bridge and the train's coming, right? Yeah.
Right.
It's, for me, Stand By Me, man, and it was unbelievable for me to figure out that this was a Stephen King adaptation. Like, he wrote the book before, and it was cool to realize that, oh wow, Stephen King's actually not all horror. It's actually, but yeah, I mean, you see Jerry O'Connell there. I mean, like you said, some of the kid actors are, some of them drifted off. Like Will Wheaton did a little bit of the Star Trek stuff. He showed back in the Big Bang Theory. You know, Jerry O'Connell. I mean, this guy, Jerry O'Connell's A-lister now. You know, you got Kiefer Sutherland, who plays the brother. That guy is, I mean, he's a music star now. But Corey Feldman, I don't know what's happened to that guy. And then, unfortunately, River Phoenix passed away. He was in a
bunch of movies, though.
He was in a bunch of the 80s and 90s movies, but he just kind of, like you said, drifted off the acting, which he's pretty much made his money. He's not really worried. But I think one of the best scenes in the Stand By Me is when they're kind of, you know, they're asking each other what's one food you could eat for the rest of your life? And they're like Pez, like a Pez dispenser. For me, that
Jerry
was
O'Connell says cherry Pez.
yeah.
Right.
So my
Cherry
number
Pez, hands down.
hands down, no question about it. So my
And
number,
they're debating whether or not Goofy's a dog or not.
I don't. I heard that he was a cow, and I also heard he was a dog. So I'm not really quite sure
Right.
on the Goofy either. But yeah, man, Stand by Me is one of those that every time it's on TV, I'm gonna stop and watch it. It's like Castaway for me with Tom Hanks. It's like once it's on, I have to
Right.
watch it. It's amazing to me.
It's great that you mentioned Stand By Me because that's another one of my honorable mentions. I don't know how it didn't make the top five. It should have, but it didn't because I really had to narrow it down. But Stand By Me is a definite six. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Again, that's another movie, just like you said, childhood stuff. I mean, we used to take walks at the town that I grew up in had railroad tracks, so we would take the railroad tracks as far out of town as possible until we figured, we better turn around sooner or later. Yeah, Will Wheaton, River Phoenix, God rest him. A lot of people forget that it's narrated by Richard Dreyfuss, who's one of my all-time favorites. Richard Dreyfuss was, I mean, my all-time favorite movie of all time is Jaws, and he's in that. And then Close Encounters of the Third Kind, et cetera, just keep going. But yeah, it's narrated by Richard Dreyfuss, which was a great pick. So you kind of hear his voice throughout. It's pretty cool. But yeah, good pick.
There's not gonna be movies for us that we're gonna be like, that's a bad pick, because they're all good movies.
Yeah. I mean, if you pick something out of the book, because there is one 80s movies that is, in my opinion, overrated. And if you pick it, I'm not gonna tell you it's bad. I'm gonna say it's okay.
Okay. But if you don't, I have a couple as well.
If you don't pick it, if you don't pick it, we don't even have to. I don't even have to mention it.
Okay.
All right. So my number three is because we're on number three, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So my number three is The Princess Bride.
Oh,
1987. For one reason and two reasons and two reasons only. Inigo Montoya and Andre the Giant.
Yeah.
When I first heard about this movie, I'm a little kid and I'm big into wrestling. I just really started getting into wrestling, and they kind of started announcing that Andre was going to be in a movie. And I thought, wow, isn't that cool? Hulk Hogan had been in Rocky 3. So I was like, this will be cool. Like Andre the Giant in the movie, like what's he going to play? And obviously he played a giant. But I mean, then you have Carrie Ells, you have Robin Wright, you have Billy Crystal as Mad Max. I mean, the whole cast, and then Rob Reiner did the whole thing. Like, the whole story is ridiculous and ludicrous, okay? Mm-hmm. It wasn't meant to be what it became. Like, it became a huge cult following kind of thing because it was kind of meant to be funny, but it ended up being that plus heartwarming too. So I can't get enough of it. Like Fred, you start off the movie with Fred Savage, and he's in bed sick, and then Peter Falk comes in, and he's the grandfather just coming to read his grandson a book. And I'll tell you what, like, I have a lot of friends that love that movie, that when I mention that movie, they can't help but saying, "Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die."
Yeah, man. The Princess Bride. I actually just saw that, I don't know, maybe a couple of years ago for the first time, and ended up, loving every minute of it. But I think Andre the Giant's acting in the movie, even though he didn't talk a lot because he's not, the best at English. I thought it was spot on
Right.
for what he was trying to do. I mean, it was great.
And I forget the name of the guy that was Vincini, who used to say inconceivable all the time.
Yeah, he
I
plays
forget
he
the act.
he plays Rex in the Toy Story films. That's where I knew his
Yes, you hear that voice, and that's what you
right,
think of, right?
right.
Inconceivable. Yeah.
I'm trying to find the guy's name real quick right now, but I can't find it. But anyways, so yeah, the Princess Bride, man, it's a yeah, it's not in my honorable mentions. I'll be honest with you, because I've only seen it once, and I actually kind of forgot about it till you said that, and I was like, oh yeah, that's right, that's a great one. Mm-hmm. But my number 3, we're gonna go to the highway to the danger zone for this one, brother. Top Gun is number 3.
Yeah. Sure.
This could have been 2 or 1. I recently just watched this for the millionth time again, because I'm going to see Top Gun Maverick. So, but this movie, now a lot of people say this is the best movie from the 80s. I don't think so. I think it is a little bit overrated to a certain extent, because there's not really a villain in this movie. Sure, you could say Val Kilmer, but it's not really. It's kind of friendly back and forth jabbers at each other. It's not really, there's not really a villain in this film, except for, Tom Cruise is kind of his own villain. Of course, you have the goose scene. You're gonna cry your eyes out watching this movie. But I mean, this movie has everything. It's got comedy, it's got action, and it was pretty damn good CGI and acting for the 80s, because there's a lot of crappy work that movies like this have done. But I mean, Top Gun is kind of top notch, a little overrated, but it still has a fantastic story to it.
Top Gun's in my honorable mentions.
Okay.
I've watched Top Gun like 100 times. Great cast.
Yes.
Val Kilmer, Anthony Edwards, Tom Cruise, of course, but I guess, like, when you're a kid, like, either you come from a military family or you don't. And
Yeah.
I happen to. I was surrounded by, I was never in the military myself, but I was surrounded by guys in the Army, the Marines, like the Navy. And so this movie, I got excited about it. Like, I didn't know what to expect out of it. Like, I thought it was a war movie, and it just turned out to be, I mean, they did have a situation to deal with, but basically it was like a competition, for aviators. And I'm not a huge Tom Cruise fan, but that's probably his best movie in my opinion. I mean, there's, you can go through and say, well, A Few Good Men or this, that, the other thing, but
right.
Or Rain Man or something. But I think, as far as entertainment goes, I'm excited to see the sequel, because I was worried that too much time had gone by or whatever. But I have a newfound respect for Tom Cruise, because I didn't know the man can actually fly jets.
That's the most crazy
You know what I
part
mean?
about that's the crazy part about
That blows my mind that he can actually fly.
that was the deal with this movie, was they were going to make it, and he made everybody go through Navy training and learn to actually drive these things. Now, I was reading something in one of the an article, and it was saying that Top Gun and the Maverick, they're not actually, like, the director would not let them fly the jets during filming, just in case something happens. So there's somebody in the same cockpit as they are, but they just CGI'd them out some way, and it makes them look like they're flying it. I mean, but yes, you do that's another letdown for the Top Gun. Is you do think this is going to be a regular military action film, but it actually turns out to be people training in jets. I mean, pretty much that's the movie. But no, I think this is you can put Mission Impossible in there as well for Tom Cruise. I'm not the biggest Cruise fan as either, but I do think this is his best movie as well.
Okay, so we're at number 2. And I kind of bounced number 2 and 1 back and forth for about a half hour. For my list. Okay.
Uh-huh.
And I had to go back to the old thing that I tell you, which is like, how many times have I seen it? And my number 1, I've seen almost as much as any other movie I've ever watched. But I've also recently gone back to the theaters to see it when it came back to the theaters. But my number two is The Breakfast Club.
Okay.
I admire The Breakfast Club because it's so simple.
Right.
It's the simplicity of it. It's like you have a group of kids, each one of them is a different kind of shall we say, class of I'm trying to figure out what word to say, but each one's a different group of an American high school back in the 80s. It might be a little bit different nowadays, but back in the 80s, these groups existed. You had the stoners, you had the prom queen and the student council, you had the jocks, you had the nerds, and then you had what they call emos nowadays, but basically the depressed kids who doesn't talk to anybody, the loners. And in this movie, you have one of each of those people, each share a Saturday detention, which was the most ridiculous part of it to me, because I don't know what American high school has Saturday detention for an entire, but I guess if it's just 1 hour after school or something, it wouldn't have been much of a movie. So they had to have a Saturday detention where you actually had an extra school day for whatever they did wrong. But at the beginning of the movie, none of them really know each other. They might have heard of each other, but they don't really know each other. And at the end, they seem to be friends.
Sure.
I can't say enough about it, except like my favorite part is they're told to write an essay by, Mr. Vernon, the guy who's in charge there. And nobody writes the essay except Brian, who's Anthony Michael Hall. He's the nerd, right?
Right.
And he writes an essay. He writes an essay that he figures that they all would say. And what he writes is, they were supposed to write on who they think they are. I want 1,000 words on who you think you are. And he writes a letter to Mr. Vernon saying, "Dear Mr. Vernon," something about, I don't know it word for word, but it's something about like, I don't know how you expect us to write an essay saying, "Who do you think we are? What do you care? You see us as you want to see us." But what we all found out is each one of us is an athlete, and a basket case, a princess, and a criminal. When that movie came out, Dylan, within a month, there was kids at school dressing up like Don Bender when they came to school. They would have the jean jacket. Like before that, there was all kinds of stuff that you wore to school. But I remember that movie coming out when I was in the middle school. I don't know if I was in the 6th grade or 7th grade. And one of my best friends at the time, his name was Dan, came to school the next day dressed in a denim jacket cut off at the sleeves. He had a pack of marbles tucked in the front t-shirt pocket, white t-shirt, and he had jeans that were kind of cut in different places and down, where nowadays in the 2000s, that might seem fashionable. Back in the 80s, they didn't do that kind of stuff.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? He came looking like he even had the leather gloves on with no fingers. And I said, what the hell are you supposed to be? He had his hair slicked back. I mean, it was great. And this one kid, Sean, I remember saying, like, who the F you think you are, John Bender? Like, so I thought the first thing I thought about when I watched this again recently, because it's my son's favorite movie, who's 21. It's his favorite movie. So he was watching it, and I said, hey, oh, cool, The Breakfast Club. So I sat down, I watched it. He was like halfway through it. And I said, you know something about it's interesting that this movie holds up when you see a lot of 80s things. You see a lot of 80s references and stuff in the movie, and stuff that they don't do nowadays, or they don't say nowadays. But it still holds up. For some reason, it holds their attention. I always tell people that The Breakfast Club taught me how to swear.
Yeah. Right.
You know what I mean? Because up until then, I might have heard the F word from my old man. But, some of the stuff they say in The Breakfast Club,
They probably couldn't say
yeah.
today. I mean, if you think about it, like, it would be considered what R, because Breakfast Club was PG-13 back in the day.
Yeah, I think it was PG-13 because they swear and they use drugs.
Okay, yeah. So, but yeah, it's Breakfast Club. That's another good one that I haven't watched. I probably watched it once. But yeah, the style, the dressing back in the day, that was kind of like when the Beatles took over in the 60s. It was absolute mayhem. People dressing up like them. That's what I hear, at least from the Breakfast Club. Like, it was just, I mean, it was a change in the movies when that happened.
It's a cultural phenomenon, man. It made us fall in love with Molly Ringwald. We still, us 80s kids, when we go to weddings or parties where there's dancing involved, we still pull out the Molly Ringwald, because that's actually a dance. Ali Sheedy, whenever she pops up in movies here and there. Of course, Anthony Michael Hall. If you've ever seen 24,
right?
He's still acting nowadays. I mean, he was more prominent in his teen years, but later on in life, he did show up in other movies. In fact, you like horror movies? Wasn't he in the latest Halloween?
Yes, I believe. For a brief period.
Right. So, and Emilio Estevez, I mean, what hasn't he done?
Right. He did the Mighty Ducks, some Outsiders, all that good stuff. And even
he growing up, I remember him in what was the one with Billy the Kid? Was that Young Guns or something?
I'm not sure.
Where he played Billy. I think he played Billy the Kid in that movie. But anyway, that's my number 2, Breakfast Club.
My number 2. I also flopped back and forth with number 1, because I was like, man, they both mean so much to me. You don't want to show disrespect to either of them, because you got to act like they have feelings. But my number 2 is 1985's Back to the Future. Man, you're talking about this, to me, is one of the greatest movies to ever be created. I mean, to think about it, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but there was a guy named Eric Stoltz back in the day. They made Back to the Future they were 75% done with the film. They had some differences, so he got fired from the movie, and they brought in Michael J. Fox. Bless his heart, Michael J. Fox created a damn good character, and they recreated Back to the Future, and it gave us one of the best trilogies of all time. I mean,
sure,
because it kind of gets right. Like for me, I judge movies based on the timing. Excuse me, the timing of the movies. Like if it takes a little while to get into it, then it's gonna go a little bit lower for me. But kind of Back to the Future is kind of boom, boom, boom. Here it is. Here's the point. Let's get it going. And now it is a little weird that he falls in love with his mother, or correction, she falls in love with him.
Well,
He's trying to he's trying to get away from her. Um, I mean, the movie has all the aspects of a children's mystery. Like you're not sure what's going to
right,
happen. How are they going to get back to the DeLorean? How are they going to get the DeLorean to work again? I mean,
right.
Back to the Future it's amazing to me. I actually watched all three in one day, a couple weeks ago, and I think Back to the Future, when I say um, one of the best trilogies, is because weirdly, Back to the Future Part Two is just as good as the first Back to the Future.
Mhm.
And the third one is a little slightly duller, but it's still very
Right,
good. Like all three Back to the Futures are prime time movies.
right.
So yeah, number two, Back to the Future.
So Back to the Future is my number one.
Okay. Okay.
And because I think it's the best thing ever to come out of
Right.
the 80s.
Yeah.
Um, you already talked about Eric Stoltz.
Mhm.
I you're not going to find somebody that knows more about Back to the Future than me.
Okay.
I've researched all kinds of stuff. The reason why Eric Stoltz got fired was because he was not getting along with Leah Thompson.
Okay.
There was no chemistry between them. There was no, you know, when they were on screen together, it just didn't have the same fire that it did when Michael J. Fox and Leah Thompson were on screen together. Also, um, Dr. Brown, uh, what's his name?
Christopher Lloyd.
Why is it? Yeah, Christopher Lloyd is one of my favorite actors of all time.
Mhm.
I mean, in everything he's ever done, I just love the zany looks he always gave. Whether he was on TV in Taxi or whether he was, in every movie he's ever done, his facial expressions alone,
Mhm.
you know, he was just that zany character, and he was perfect for Dr. Brown. Thomas Wilson playing himself as a teenager and then playing himself
Yes.
when he's 45 or whatever it
Well, see,
is.
Leah Thompson did the
Um,
same thing. She played an older
and she did
mother,
the
and then
same, but she did
yes,
it twice. She did it where, in the beginning of the movie, she's herself
right.
in 1985, as in the mid 40s, but she looks terrible because she's been drinking and letting herself go. And then when Marty kind of quote unquote fixes everything, they come back to it and she looks great. You know what I'm saying? And Crispin Glover, can't say enough about his George McFly.
Yes.
Yeah, the whole thing. I can watch that thing over and over again. It's like you said, one of the greatest movies and trilogies ever created. The story is great. The whole thing. Can you imagine being able to go back in time and meet your parents when they were teenagers? Like, I mean, the whole thing is crazy. And in Back to the Future 2, they go to 2015, remember?
Yes. And we had there was
So when
flying
two
cars, and you had these
there
shoelaces that laced
right.
themselves up.
Yes. Power laces and hoverboards and right.
Yeah.
So 2015 was 6 years ago. When 2015 came out, they had an anniversary edition at my local drive-in of Back to the Future, and they played all three movies back to back to back. And me and a bunch of my buddies who love the Back to the Future trilogy, we all just went,
Mhm.
and we had a blast. I mean,
Mhm.
they had like a 10 or 15-minute intermission in between each movie, so you can go get a snack, or we packed up coolers and food and all that stuff, man. And I mean, you're talking 9 hours of movies. I mean, well, no, not really. We were there for 9 hours, but if you add all the running times together, it's about 6 or 7 hours. But
Right.
um, yeah, Back to the Future is my number one because it just, for lack of a better term, it stands the test of time, which is
Yeah.
interesting because that's what it's about. And
Yeah.
if you've never seen it, if you've never seen the documentary on it called Back in Time, you should watch that because that's done by the creators of the movie, and they do interviews with all the cast, and then they do interviews with like super fans. I mean, people who have collected stuff from the movies. There's like
Mhm.
this rich guy that has a garage that has he has one of the DeLoreans, and then he has that truck, that black Toyota.
Mhm.
Like he has the actual truck in
Oh,
his
wow.
possession, and he has the Rolls Royce, the old car that Doc Brown had back in 1955. So he has a whole bunch of memorabilia. See, they talked to him. He talked to this couple. The wife's name's Terry. I forget the name of the husband, but they go to all the Comic Cons, like in San Diego
Mhm.
and Philadelphia and New York and so forth. And whenever they have a Back to the Future exhibit, um, they bring one of the DeLoreans. They own one of the DeLoreans, so they bring it and they charge $20 for you to take your picture with it and sit in it. I'll send you the picture of me standing next to it for you.
Okay. Okay, cool.
Because I went to Philadelphia a few years ago, and I actually sat in one of the DeLoreans that they used to make Back to the Future 2.
Wow.
And my $20, I gladly handed over because they don't take any of the money. All their proceeds goes to the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's,
Right, right, right.
which is freaking awesome. So, like I said, I can't say enough about how much I love Back to the Future. That's why I had to put it number one.
And quickly, I will say this about Back to the Future before I get to my number one. The cool thing about Back to the Future 2, which they don't do this anymore in any type of movie, is, well, I mean, what happened was 2 and 3 were filmed back to back. Like, soon as the second one started, they had like 2 weeks off, and then they started filming the third one. Well, in the second one, as soon as it goes off, before it shows the end credit scene, they showed the trailer for part 3 in the movie theater right after the movie and saying, "Come back in 6 months, the third one will be out."
Yep.
Which was
And they had to do that. They had to do that because so that the characters didn't, especially Marty, didn't age anymore. And also that, in case they started getting booked doing other things, and they would have to put it off a year or 2 years or
right.
3 years or whatever.
Which
You
I
know?
think, which I think was the best thing for them to do, was to film it back to back,
Yep.
because they could have waited too long, and then what happens with movies that happen too long till they're made. It's crazy. Now,
Right.
my number one, Al. People are gonna say, no, there's multiple movies. No, there's not. There's only 2 originals and there's 2 remakes. My number
Right.
one is 1984's Ghostbusters. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. I remember when I first watched it, I was,
I,
geez,
I
dude,
knew you were gonna pick that.
Ghostbusters. I don't remember how old it was, 8, 9, 10 maybe. And I remember I got a proton blaster for Christmas, and I was blasting the shit out of clothes and pillows and blankets. I was the man of that. But one of the coolest things a lot of people don't realize about, Ghostbusters, is the movie is somewhat based on a true story. Like, Dan Aykroyd grew up in a haunted house with families that his family was a paranormal investigators. And so like he saw all this weird shit and he was like, let's just make it into a great fun movie. I mean, from beginning to end, for me, I don't give a lot of movies 5 stars, but Ghostbusters for me is an easy 5 star platinum. I mean, you got Sigourney Weaver, a small Rick Moranis, which is kind of cool to see Rick Moranis. That that was great. You got Bill Murray, who is, I mean, trying to stay serious in a somewhat serious, funny movie. It's kind of crazy to ask Bill Murray to do. I mean, Bill Murray stole this from, Harold Ramis and Dan Aykroyd. I mean, I don't really know what to say about Ghostbusters other than it's my favorite movie of all time. This movie is timeless. This movie is everything to me. Like I can't imagine what if this movie was never made. Like that, there's not there's not a thought in my mind. What if that never was made?
So Ghostbusters is one of my honorable mentions.
Okay.
I feel about it almost as strongly as you do. I love Ghostbusters. Love all the actors in it. I think it's another one that stands the test of time because my 5-year-old has seen Ghostbusters and she loves it.
Oh man, yeah.
She loves Slimer. She loves the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, like the whole thing. She even like gets a little scared of the dogs running around,
right,
right.
Yeah.
The mythical dogs and she hasn't seen the new Ghostbusters Afterlife yet, but
right.
She'll get the reference. She'll then get the
yes,
reference.
She'll understand it. Yes,
of Zool, and Gozer. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, I've seen Ghostbusters a ton. My kids have all seen it. Including my 5-year-old, and it, like again, it was 1984. We're talking, 35 plus years later. It's still
right.
You could put it on and any person, I don't care, man, woman, or child, would enjoy themselves. I mean, that's what a movie's supposed to do, right? It's supposed to kind of take you into a different world, and when you come out on the other end, you were thoroughly entertained. I don't know anybody that doesn't like Ghostbusters.
Right. Well, man, that's our top 5. Why don't we real quick run through our honorable mentions here?
Yeah. So you want to go first or me?
I'll go first this time. What we're going to do is we'll just go back and forth like we did 5, our top 5.
Okay.
So I'm just going to go top to bottom. I don't have these numbered. So
yeah, they're in no particular order.
The first one on the list is Over the Top. In my opinion, other than Rocky, I think this is the greatest Sylvester Stallone movie ever made. I mean, this movie to me is some amazing stuff. I mean, he's a truck driver. He's trying to, get a relationship back with his son after his mother died. He's fighting off all these people. It is crazy, man. Over the Top is an excellent watch if nobody's watched it.
I think it's totally underrated. I do.
Underrated 100%.
It's not on my list, but it is fun. I've seen it. I've seen it a few times, and yeah, you're right. It's one of those because of Rocky and Rambo. It doesn't get a lot of credit because some of his other movies, kind of get pushed aside when it comes to when we're talking about him. The first thing you think is Rocky and then Rambo, so
right.
So I mentioned earlier that you mentioned Big as on your list and Ghostbusters and Stand By Me. Those are 3 of my honorable mentions, so I don't really have to talk about those 3.
Right.
Because you mentioned Big, Ghostbusters, and Stand By Me in your top 5, and they were 3 of my honorable mentions. So that means I only really have like let's see, like 4 left.
Okay.
And so I'm gonna mention E.T.
Okay.
So E.T. 1982, E.T. was the first movie I ever saw in a theater. I was a little kid. My grandmother took me because she thought I'd like it. She knew I liked Star Wars, so she thought I would like it because she didn't know anything about it other than it was about an alien.
Right.
All right, it was called E.T. the Extraterrestrial. So she didn't know. She didn't see a trailer. They didn't really have trailers back then. I mean, sometimes they'd have them on TV as a commercial, but she just heard about it and she decided to take me. I was 6 years old. So it has a special place in my heart because you know how much I love movies. We're sitting here talking about our favorite movies and in the 80s. And I mean, I love movies so much. I watch way too many. I watch more movies than I should. But anyway, ET's on my honorable mentions because it started all that. You know,
Mm-hmm.
on top of that, it's a good movie. I mean, you know, the whole story, young Drew Barrymore. I love Drew Barrymore. I mean, I didn't love her then; she was a little kid. But nowadays, Drew Barrymore, I love Drew
She's
Barrymore.
great. She's great.
So yeah, listen. I could talk on and on and on about ET, but it's one of my honorable mentions. So I'll just mention, and that's the reason why.
Yeah, ET's on there for me as well as Ferris Bueller's Day Off. You mentioned that earlier. So I only have a couple left as well. But I'm gonna put Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure on there. It's the goofy comedy that I enjoy. The goofy, you know, they didn't show that they were pot smoking, but I probably guarantee you that they smoked a little bit before before they went on their adventures. But yeah, I just love the goofy comedy and Bill
They
and
seem
Ted
to
is
be
that for me.
stoner. They seem to be stoners, right? They seem to be
Right,
stoners that
yeah.
didn't actually smoke.
Yeah, and then they made a new Bill and Ted, the third one, and it was actually pretty decent.
Right.
I was afraid as well that it was going to be bad, but
Sure.
it wasn't that bad. So yeah, Bill and Ted's
Yeah, it
Excellent
was all
Adventure.
right. Yeah, that's one of mine too. So I'll just skip over that one, but that's on my list too. As is Top Gun, which you mentioned earlier.
Yes.
Top Gun is also my thing. So I have two left.
Okay.
And one of those is Raiders of the Lost Ark. That started a great trilogy, but I don't really count Crystal Skull because you mentioned it, that movies that have four or more movies. Crystal Skull to me was an abomination. I really don't acknowledge its existence.
Really, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it, dude. I thought it was pretty good. But what do I know?
I was expecting more out of it, and it kind of irks me a little bit. I love Harrison Ford and I love Indiana Jones, and
yeah,
there's parts of that movie that I really enjoy, but the whole premise of the whole thing, like, you know what I mean? You're not gonna be able to get me to sit here and talk about how terrible an Indiana Jones movie is, because to me it's Indiana Jones, right?
Right.
But Raiders of the Lost Ark is the one I'm talking about. That was from 1981. When I first saw it, I was hooked. I wanted to see more of Indiana Jones, and the whole thing, the Ark of the Covenant. I was raised Catholic, so I thought it was interesting to me that it was a religious artifact that he was going after, and that was part of it. And then Karen Allen, she's amazing, of course. The whole thing with the Nazis, everything. So it's like Reese Davis, Reese Davies, who plays Sala, is also good in Raiders. To date, out of Raiders, Temple of Doom, and Search for the Grail, the Last Crusade.
Yes.
Raiders is my favorite of those three. So yeah, Raiders is an honorable mention here.
Yeah. growing up, now me and my brother have the somewhat of the same taste of movies, but growing up, we were totally different. He's 3 years younger than I am, but we sat down together one time and watched all three Indiana Jones when we had to be in high school. And it was one of those where we loved every single one of them. And now we're excited that the new one's coming out here next year or the next, and we're gonna go watch it together like we usually do with the Marvels.
I have high hopes. I have high hopes, Dylan, because it has to be better than Crystal Skull. And I think that's one of the reasons why he's doing it. He didn't like. I mean, he's 80 years old now.
Yeah.
And so he didn't like the way Crystal Skull was received. And he's looking to retire soon and things like that. So I don't know if the movie's completely made yet. I don't know if they're going to tie in a son and who's going to play that person, because it would make sense for him and his son to go on an adventure together, since that's kind of what they did in
Crystal
Last
Skull.
Crusade with
Right. Well,
with Sean Connery.
Okay, because him
and his dad.
Okay, I got you.
You know
But did Indiana Jones, Shia LaBeouf showed up to be the long lost son of Indiana Jones? Is that right? That's correct, huh?
Right, but that's correct. But I don't know but you didn't know he was his son until the end.
Okay, right, yeah.
And so I don't know if they'll get Shia LaBeouf or somebody else, but
right.
But I hope that's what they do, but I don't know what they're going to do, because I haven't heard anything about it. I just heard that it exists.
Right.
So I have high hopes. But the man's 80 years old. How much can he do? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I actually have three. So I'm going to run through one real quick, because
run through them. Yeah, because I got one left.
Yeah. So Ghost is on there with Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore.
That's a good one.
It's a good one. And I tell you, I'm not the biggest Patrick Swayze fan. My mom, that's her, that's her idol. She loves Dirty Dancing, her favorite movie. I'm not a big fan of it, but I actually happen to enjoy Ghost a lot, because it was just a different dynamic that you still haven't seen them try to recreate it today in any way.
Yeah, I don't think they will.
And secondly, here, we're going to put Beetlejuice on the list. I'm going to talk about real quick. I'm a big fan of Beetlejuice, Michael Keaton. I'm just going to say, I don't think they should do the second Beetlejuice like they're doing. I'm obviously going to watch it, but I feel Beetlejuice is a little overrated, like Top Gun, but I still enjoy it for what it is. I don't think it's a masterpiece, but I will sit down and watch it from time to time. I find it's a fun watch.
So Beetlejuice is my last honorable mention.
Okay.
Because I'm a big Tim Burton fan, and that kind of put him on the map, right?
Right. Yeah.
I enjoy Beetlejuice for what it is. I mean, he's a character that people dress up to this day. I mean, if you go to a Halloween shop,
that's true.
There are Beetlejuice costumes available, because he is a memorable character, a fun character. I mean, he's scary but funny. Mm-hmm. And that's a rarity in the movie business, to create someone that people never forget, that person, never forget that character. And I'm sure Keaton, when he goes to conventions and stuff, sure he gets asked Batman questions and things like that. But I'm sure there a lot of fans ask him questions about Beetlejuice, because it has one of those cult followings.
Mm-hmm.
It's dark, it's witty, it's fun. I mean, Gina Davis, Alec Baldwin. I mean, if you look at Alec Baldwin in that movie, you couldn't believe it. Like, you see Alec Baldwin nowadays, how he looks like a young, you know what I mean? Like, he's so thin and so young looking. Like, I don't know how old he was when he made that movie, but man, I mean, he looks like he's in his like high 20s, early 30s, something like that.
Right.
And
I remember Al, I remember watching Beetlejuice when I was younger. That was kind of when I first saw it. And it's crazy when you watch stuff when you're younger versus when you watch it when you're older because you catch more things. And I did not
yes,
realize for the longest time that Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin had died in that car accident because they just nonchalant show you they walk home, yada yada, and
right,
then they get inherited with Beetlejuice. But after you watch it, you're like, oh wow, damn, they actually died in the car wreck. And then the fact that Beetlejuice went to hell at the end of the movie, it was like I should have been watching
right.
that. I don't think growing up.
Yeah, and a young Winona Ryder, and
Right.
she's now a big part of Stranger Things, and so it's like, and if you're a fan of the '80s at all, everything that everything that Dylan and I have been talking about this entire podcast gets referenced in Stranger Things. Ghostbusters, Goonies, Beetlejuice, E.T. It all gets referenced in Stranger Things at one point or another.
Man, I have never seen
Um,
Stranger Things. I've never seen an episode, I don't think. And I don't know if I want to start because there's just
if
so
you
many
like,
seasons.
I think you should.
Okay.
I think you should because it's chock full of '80s references that you might not get because you're a little younger than me, but
Sure.
you will get because you will get some of them because you've seen the movies.
Okay.
And I mean, underneath that, it's got great child actors, and you watch them grow up the first three seasons, and then come season four, which they're on right now, which I think is the final season.
Yes.
Um, they're all like teenagers, you know, after puberty. Like it seems like from season three to season four, they go from like 13 years old to 16. And so they're like totally different. I mean, they've all sprouted, they're all like young men and women now. So it's like it's weird, but Winona Ryder plays the mom, like one of the main moms involved, and
Mm.
it's really good. Like it's really good, believe me. Like I've steered you towards shows before, but like this, like I can tell you that it's got such a huge following out there. It's insane. Like Stranger Things, when you first start watching it, you're like, what is this? What's going on here? And um the girl, Billy
Millie Bobby
Brown,
Brown.
yeah, she's amazing throughout. You watch her grow up. She plays the main character, the protagonist, if you will. And you watch her grow up from like 11 years old or so to like 16 or 17, and it's an amazing thing. But she's um it's got a huge cast, man. Like I can't begin to start naming the cast because people pop up and you're like, oh my god, that's so and so, oh my god, that's so and so, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And it's just the world that they live in. It's just it's crazy. The whole story is crazy, and it's I can't say enough good things about Stranger Things. I swear, you only need to watch the first episode. Just watch season one, episode one, and then you tell me whether you're going to keep watching it or not.
Okay. I am in the middle
Then
of.
you've only wasted.
Go ahead.
Then you've only wasted 1 hour instead of the countless hours it'll take to catch up.
Right. I'm almost done with Better Call Saul. I'm almost caught up on that. So once I finish that,
Okay.
I will I will
Yeah,
check
you'll
that
check
out.
out Stranger Things. You'll thank me later.
Okay.
Stranger Things is amazing. It shocks me that you haven't seen it because I know the kind of movies you like. You
Well,
like horror, you like sci-fi. It's all that. It's thriller, horror, sci-fi all wrapped into one.
okay, cool. Well, man, look, that does it for the 80s movies, dude. I appreciate you coming on here, but
80s.
80s. I do want to do one thing. I got like 5 minutes left here. I want to know
Okay.
your top two most the top two movies that are releasing this year that you're the most excited for. I'll give mine as well.
Well, Jurassic World which
Dominion.
comes out this weekend.
Yes.
Dominion. I'm really excited for. Um, I'm not gonna lie. I'm also excited for Top Gun,
Yes.
which I haven't seen yet. Which I've seen. I've heard a lot of good things about. Um, I, I mean, it's pretty much it that I can think of off the top of my head. I haven't heard of anything. I mean, and maybe the last thing I'll say is the last Halloween, the supposed last Halloween, the Halloween, what do they call it? Halloween ends.
Halloween ends.
Yeah, yeah. So that those will be I'll give you three there.
Yeah.
Jurassic World, Dominion, Top Gun, Maverick, and Halloween ends.
Well, I'll say this about Halloween. You said supposedly the final one. Apparently, Jamie Lee Curtis owns some rights to the Halloween franchise. So I think she says this is like it. I don't think she wants to do them anymore. Which she could always sell her rights and they could just redo the shit like Rob Zombie did. But so I am looking forward to that Halloween ends. I am number one. Of course, you got Top Gun and Jurassic World, Dominion. But the number one for me, Al, is I'm a big Elvis Presley fan. He's my greatest artist of all time. They have this movie coming out next weekend, and dude, this movie looks absolutely phenomenal. So like that's the new Elvis movie is with Tom Hanks in my opinion going to be, if it lives up to the hype, because Priscilla and Lisa Marie are all giving praise to it, which is the first time it's happened when they've made it Elvis special. If it turns out to be up to standards, then this could be one of the greatest movies of my lifetime.
Well, I love biopics or biopics, whichever you prefer.
Right.
I did like Bohemian Rhapsody about Queen.
Yes.
And Rocket Man about Elton John.
Elton John, right.
But the one that I heard about just recently, I heard that they're doing one about Madonna that she's getting behind.
Yeah, do you know
And
the chick that, have you seen Ozark?
Oh yeah.
Okay, Ruth in Ozark. She has officially been announced as playing Madonna. And I think that is a brilliant move because this chick is money.
So what's funny about her is that Madonna's a big fan of Ozark, and when they were trying to figure out who to play her, Madonna mentioned her, and the producers and everybody involved said, I don't know if she can sing. So they said, bring her in. And so she met Madonna, and Madonna asked her to sing. And she sang. And she said, there you go.
Two things.
Sometimes it's weird, right?
Yeah,
it's weird when stuff like that happens.
For me, a lot of people complain about biopics, about how fast they move. Like, oh, it didn't happen overnight. Again, you have 2 hours, 2.5 at most to make something so interesting. So I don't have a problem with that factor that, sure, if you do your research, you're going to know Queen. It didn't happen overnight. They didn't find Freddie Mercury like that, but they had to make it within a 2-hour time frame.
Or like Ray. You ever see Ray?
I saw
about Ray Charles.
Yeah, with Jamie Foxx.
Jamie Foxx, yeah.
It did not happen that way, but I appreciate that, because again, they're under time restraint. They don't have 30 years to make a movie. They have 2 hours.
Right.
So I don't feel that, but the one part that I do, and it's the same for this Elvis movie, and it's going to be the same for the Madonna movie, is I don't enjoy when an actor takes over the part and sings the songs. I prefer that they just they sing along to the song and they dub it over. It's just this pity thing for me. I mean, Walk the Line is one of my favorite movies, and Joaquin Phoenix sang the parts in it, which but that's just a big hootenanny for me. I can't. It just irritates me knowing that. Well, wait, if this movie's about Elvis, I don't really care what this guy sounds like. I want to hear Elvis. You know what I mean?
Exactly. So yeah, I don't know when the Madonna movie's coming out, but you mentioned like what are you excited about this year? I don't think it's coming out this year, but I just heard about it like a couple days ago. So I look for it and whatever I could find on it because I, as being a child of the '80s, I mean I worshipped the Madonna back in the day. So I'm sure I'll be front row center for that one.
Well, Al, look, man, I appreciate you coming back on here. I hate hitting you back up because I'm like, man, it's been 4 months and we're probably tired of doing this. You're probably tired of hearing from me. But
Oh,
I try to
absolutely
keep
not. You're absolutely wrong. You're wrong. I love the hodgepodge. I love uh having these discussions with you because they're always an interesting discussion. And we usually are pretty close. Like most of the movies we had on our list might not have been in the same order, but we had pretty much the top 10 movies, top 15 movies of the '80s. I mean, like we said before, it's really hard to narrow it down to five, but it was interesting trying.
it, it was, man. Well, look, dude, I gotta go. I got to the podcast here, but I appreciate you doing this for me, dude. We'll.
Absolutely.
This is not gonna be the last time hearing from you, Al. I know we say that every few months, but we're gonna get back on here.
I
We're gonna
know.
do these.
Sounds good to me, man. Yeah, man. Be well, be safe.
Yeah, man. You too. I appreciate it, brother. I'll talk to you later.
Yes, sir.
All right, bye.